Hey listeners, Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. I get the privilege of working alongside all of our creators at Enrollify, but I wanted to take just a quick moment to tell you about why I love the Talking Tactics podcast hosted by Diana Kibbolds. Every other Tuesday, Day drops a new episode where she focuses on a single tactic that moved the needle on any enrollment metric, from inquiries and booth visitors to apps completed and deposits, even registrations, you name it. The catch? The tactic had to be done with limited resources, either by a single person or a small but mighty team, or limited time, or maybe without a lot of money. The podcast format is fun and engaging, and it's just different from the more traditional 60-minute interview style shows. If you work in enrollment management or marketing, be sure to give Day's show a listen. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Talking Tactics wherever you get your podcasts.
There is something happening in this industry when it comes to a tenure of a president, and we know the real impact of what that short tenure means for our marketing and communication leaders. We have to talk about it, Seth.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your Monday morning energizer covering insights and trends in higher ed marketing and enrollment. I'm Mallory Wilsey, bringing over 15 years of ed tech and marketing expertise to your earbuds.
And I'm Seth Odell, joining the Pulse with my own adventures from leading marketing at top universities to founding Kanahoma, one of the industry's fastest growing digital marketing agencies.
Each week, we bring you the kind of insider insights you typically only find over cocktails with your pals at a conference.
It's fast, it's fun, and it's designed for you, the busy higher ed professional.
You're not just listening to another podcast.
You're checking the pulse of higher education.
Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Seth, it has been a wild 7 days since we relaunched the enrollify.org website, but I have to say it is functioning. It's beautiful. It's making me happy every time I wake up. I don't know. Tell me how much you love it, because I'm enjoying the positive.
I will. I've been meaning to tell you, like, congrats and happy launch week. Like, it's a big deal. It looks awesome. You know, especially as the network is growing, I feel like it's more and more important, right? Like discoverability and people to navigate stuff. You all have solved a lot of that. And so more than anything, congrats. Like, this is not a small lift. So it's super exciting to see the new site up.
You know, I think for me, what's really exciting is just the ability for us to now surface information about our incredible podcast hosts. Like, our creators are the thing that makes this whole network run. And the old website just didn't put you all with the right spotlight. And so the fact that anytime we have a creator going out and speaking at a conference, we now have a space to showcase that. Anytime we have our team doing a webinar panel or creating new courses, that's something we're going to be investing heavily in the back half of the year. We now have like a real space to feature that. The old website was good for promoting the podcast, but our network has grown into so much more than just podcasts that you know, a novel idea, having a website that supports other content types, but, you know, we've made it to 2024.
It takes a lot of work. But, I mean, look, the Enrollify Network's been growing like crazy. It only makes sense to update the website, but it's great. I just think kudos to the whole team. I'm super excited about it.
It's so cool. All right. Well, as much as I'd love to sit here and just like hear you tell me how pretty the new website is, because it is.
We got stuff to cover though.
We do. And actually, we have a huge topic today. Seth, you and I know we decided to do this episode topic like almost a month ago. And then literally this morning, as I am prepping for this recording, I go to the Chronicles website and This topic is the entire feature section of the homepage. There's been new articles posted about it, and it just makes it feel even more urgent and timely to have this conversation than ever before. And so listeners are sitting here being like, what's the topic? What could it be? Well, a couple weeks ago, Yale named its new president, Maury McInnes. And until that announcement, half of the Ivy League needed a new president. And so I'm sure listeners have been catching up on this. Presidents from like Harvard and Penn recently stepped down because of all the scrutiny around them testifying about campus anti-Semitism before Congress. And then even last month, the president of Cornell announced her resignation. And it's not just the Ivies. In June, the University of Laverne's president stepped down as well after only 10 months in office. And so there is something happening in this industry when it comes to a tenure of a president. And we know the real impact of what that short tenure means for our marketing and communication leaders. We have to talk about it, Seth.
Yeah, we got to talk. I think there's an absolute crisis at the presidential level of the absence and vacancies for presidents in college and universities. To your point, not only are there more openings, but also the tenure is shortening. And so, the data I saw was in 2022, the average president's on the job less than 6 years. Back in 2008, it was, 8.5, closer to 9. And that's important because we also know there's a lot of outliers. There are a lot of institutions that have had presidents for 10, 15 years, which means there are more and more presidents that are churning even faster. Yeah, I read this morning a story of a president that left in 10 months. And so, as higher ed is getting increasingly crowded and complex, I think the corner office is getting to be a harder and harder role. And when you either don't have a president, you have a presidential search going on, or you have a failed president, or even in some cases, a lame duck president where they've announced they're going to be done at the end of their contract, there's huge ramifications for marketers, and almost none of it is good. And so, I think it's important to unpack because so many of my own friends and colleagues in our industry are dealing with this, right? Either a new president coming on board, they're dealing with a presidential search. And while every institution is different, I will say that by and large, there are a lot of themes across this, and I think there's a lot of shared advice that we can probably unpack. But I don't know, maybe should we first talk about why this matters for higher ed pros? I don't know, that may be a topic we're talking about. Why is obviously it's a big deal to not have a president, but for marketers, I think it matters too. So maybe we should unpack a little bit about what does it mean for a marketer when a new president comes in?
Yeah, we should. And I think even stepping back one step here, why is it happening? Because you noted that I saw the same research out of ACE as well. Those tenures are getting shorter and shorter. I remember when I was in college, the president had been there for 15 years or something. It was a huge deal when he left. And that just doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And the reasons for that, there was a great article in the Chronicle, an interview with the retiring president of Hamilton College, who actually had a very lengthy tenure at Hamilton. He said that, and he's not retiring because of some of the reasons that are causing people to turn over so quickly. He's got more than 3 decades in this industry. He's over 70. It's just his time to retire. But he said that this is the worst political environment for higher ed that he has ever seen in his 30 plus years in this industry. And on top of that, there's all these increased pressures around student mental health, social justice, the fundraising component, which, let's be real, that is a primary responsibility of presidents, but then also all of the challenges with enrollment and the demographic cliff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like a shitstorm right now for presidents. So this is why it's happening. So yes, Seth, now let's talk about why it matters for marketers.
Yeah. And I'll say for marketers, I think that, one of the biggest reasons it's a problem is that when a new president comes in, they have been having conversations with the board, right? Board of trustees or board of directors that are hiring them. And when it comes to board of trustees, they're establishing some level of expectation. And by and large, my experience has been new presidents come in and they promise growth and prosperity. Because if you're on a board and your job is to hire a president, no one wants to hire the contrarian president that says, maybe we should just slowly bleed out, manage the downside of this, be realistic. I don't think those presidential candidates are making it very far, even though I think maybe they should. And so what you're often finding is that boards are choosing people that they have the highest confidence in, but sometimes that's just who's the best salesperson and who can spin the best story. And so my experience has been new presidents come in with new, bigger expectations, but no clear plan on how to achieve them. And so what that means for marketers is immediately the goalposts have moved, and it's like the opposite of the market trends and the headwinds that you're facing. And often those have been moved without your involvement. And so that is really particularly challenging because, respectfully, I think the headline is new presidents overpromise, and then it's up to marketing to try to deliver. And so as a result, I think there's more and more pressure on marketing. I also think that there's like certain common projects and jobs that come with it. So like presidents are not typically marketers, right? You know, my grandfather was a president who actually came up through marketing, but that's very rare. And most often they're coming from academics, or occasionally now we're seeing outside the industry. So I don't know if you want to hit on this, but I think like I'd love to hear your take on like there's typically like a handful of projects that every new president wants to do, and I think by and large they're the same. So what do you think are like the most common projects that new presidents want to tackle?
It's not what do I think, it's what do I know. I have done more than 10 years of qualitative buyer interviews around this exact topic. I've got data that I can't publish it, but I've got crazy data around this. There are three what we call priority initiatives. What triggers a rebrand? What triggers a website redesign? What triggers a change in marketing technology? I'll tell you what. A new president. That by far and large, those three things will fall like dominoes when a new president walks on that campus. And it's for a few reasons. Like they visually, if you think about the institution's creative expression of their brand and how that gets, put on the website, that is a very visual way to mark your arrival at an institution. And a new president who's walking into right now, higher ed in general is facing a lot of crises around enrollment. And so when that new president walks in, they think there's a silver bullet. Oh, we're just going to rebrand. Oh, we're just going to, redesign the website. It will solve all of our problems. And I know every marketer is listening to this right now and rolling their eyes because we know it's not a silver bullet, but that tends to be the expectation. And then on top of that, if that wasn't enough change, on top of that, a total, look and evaluation of the technology that's in place at the institution happens from every single angle. And that includes the marketing technology. So let's just change the brand, the website, and all the MarTech that supports it. Yeah, no big deal. Yeah, just little things.
Yeah. And which, by the way, I think those projects by and large need to be done and they're very important, but none of them have short-term impact. Like you want to build a new website, you're talking about 12 months, 18 months, a brand project, 12 months, 18 months. And that's if you're lucky, let alone if you have to RFP this thing and align people, it can very easily get longer. And I don't think boards have the appetite to wait that long. And I think that's like one of the biggest mistakes that new presidents make is they immediately come in and they go after these long-term initiatives rather than looking for short-term wins. And that's probably like my first piece of advice I'd have to marketers. So I've been on the receiving end of new presidents myself internally as a head of marketing. One of the biggest things I think is critical is like finding quick wins early and elevating them to a new president because they need to get the board off their back and they need to buy air cover even if like total enrollment hasn't suddenly shot way up or totally improved. And so like to me, look, if your president's going to fund a new website, go for it. But like, let them know that maybe you need to do like a 90 or 100-day CRO sprint first. And like, let's get some resources just to like improve things, put a program finder on the homepage, speed up the site, like, improve conversion. Like we don't have time to wait. And that's probably the biggest advice I would have for a new president is that like, how much time do you have until you need to have results on the scoreboard? Because that's the miss for most presidents, I think, is that these are the correct initiatives to do at some point. But when you talk about like a critical path, like what to do in what order, you don't have the air cover to wait a year or two to do this. And I just think not enough presidents realize that. And they're in an interview or they're talking to the board and it's like low hanging fruit. It's like, if you're not hitting your numbers, you criticize the marketing that you see. And that's the brand and that's the website. And they're not wrong. But the question is they're wrong about the order it needs to be done in. And, if you have the presidency as a marketer, that's like one of the first things I'd say you got to figure out how to educate them on, not just what to do, but the order to do it.
Hey there, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Higher ed is facing a leadership crisis. The demands on today's college and university leaders are skyrocketing, and talent is leaving the industry at an unprecedented rate. New leaders like you are emerging, but no one is getting the proper training to be successful.
Well, Enrollify is here to change that. Our new course, Lessons in Leadership, taught by Dr. Carrie Phillips, will prepare you to be a confident, empathetic, and effective leader. From systems thinking to adaptive leadership, building culture to handling difficult decisions, this comprehensive online course is perfect for new and aspiring leaders. Don't wait. The course starts September 9th, and for a lucky group of 26 students, we have the option to add interactive sessions with Dr. Phillips for personalized guidance. Visit Enrollify.org to learn more. And Seth, we know how long some of these projects take. It can be a year-long process to just find the right agency to support you through some of these projects, let alone go through the projects themselves. And so compound everything you just said with that shorter and shorter tenure of a president. Now put yourself in a situation where that president is turning over every 1 to 3 years. Do you want to go through a rebrand every 1 to 3 years? I mean, that's bonkers.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is. And that's where I think one of the best things you can do when a new president comes in is try to get their ear as much as possible and try to find a way to have that seat at that table, because you don't know how long they aren't going to be there. And so, it's hard to do this, but I would say work under the assumption they're going to last and work under the assumption that they're going to be there to get these things done. But also don't get your heart broken if they don't. I know a lot of marketers that outlast a lot of presidents, but I also know a lot of marketers who have been casualties of new presidents. And that's the other caution I think I would give to marketers is you have to make sure that you are part of the solution, not part of the problem. One of the other pieces of advice I would say is, it's really easy when people come in with unrealistic plans to tell them all the reasons you've done that before and it doesn't work, or tell them all the problems of the past. And I do think you need alignment with new leadership, but you need to do that very quickly and move on. And you have to quickly be part of the solutions and be future focused and not just be seen as a naysayer. I've seen a lot of folks fall into the trap of they're realists to a fault. And obviously that president's unrealistic, but they've made the promise. They're a politician. They've sold through that initiative already. They're going to attempt to deliver it one way or the other. I mean, I had a leader tell me once, we don't have time for a rebuilding year. Because I'd gone to them and I said, here's all the things we need to do. I need a flat year to solve all these problems, and I can drive serious growth in 12 to 18 months. And they were like, I don't have time for a rebuilding year. I've already promised short-term results. And it was awful. And I'm like, well, that's a terrible thing that you just did. But they did it and they're my boss. And so I might as well eat it and move on. And so take the medicine. What's been promised has been promised. Be part of the solution, not just a naysayer of the past.
A good skill set to build up is your skill sets around asking questions, right? Become the interviewer. Maybe you were or were not actually part of the decision making around this new president, and that's fine. But if I was getting into that room with that new president for the first time, I would have done my research to make sure that I knew exactly what information I needed to get out of that meeting. And that includes questions around that president and their history with other marketing teams and their perspectives on what the role of marketing should be for an institution.
That's actually fantastic advice, which is that at the same time that you're trying to give the new president a baseline for the history of marketing with the institution, you need to establish the baseline of the history of marketing with the president.
Absolutely.
You're right, because if they've had failed projects in the past or successful projects in the past, they're carrying that legacy with them. If their last website rebuild worked flawlessly or if it totally failed, that's all baggage. You're totally right. I don't know that I've done a good enough job of that in my career, of trying to let me almost give you an assessment of what is your marketing POV, acumen, appetite, so I know where you're coming from. That's really, really good advice. I wish you just gave that to me 8 years ago. Solved a lot of problems.
Well, we at Element 451, we get the benefit of this sometimes. Sometimes our presidents leave our customer institutions and go to a different one. And our product is so awesome that they want to take us with them. And we're like, absolutely, please do, obviously. But totally. I try and put myself in the shoes of the people that they're walking into that room with saying, here you go, you're going to use this new technology. It's because they've got good baggage with Element 451's product and they want to bring it and use it to be successful at their new place. But that doesn't necessarily mean the teams that they're walking into understand that tech, want to use that tech, right?
Totally.
It's never fun to be on the receiving end of a leader telling you that you have to use a certain agency or a certain tool, regardless of whether or not it really is the right decision.
Totally. That's super fair. Couple of pieces of advice I would share with marketers for new presidents. One of the first ones I would say is load up your wish list. New presidents have a honeymoon period, and I describe it as like, look, there is a train going down the tracks, and that's this new president and their initiatives. And there's been a lot of times in my career I've been able to just like shove my wish list onto it. And it's like, sure, you become like the 14th bullet on this thing, but it's like, have you been wanting to do this or that thing or test something out or onboard a new strategy? Like now is the time. If the president's not asking about CRM, but you've wanted to, like load up the train because it's heading down the tracks. That's one piece I'd say. The second is like,
Seth, not to interrupt, but like how often have you actually aligned that wish list back to what you know might be the strategic plan or the specific goals of why that president was hired? Have you taken those steps, or have your customers done that?
Yeah, so there's a couple times we've been able to do that. It depends on the level of transparency. But yeah, when you can get insights into exactly what the key initiatives are, it's ideal when it's a strategic plan. We've only probably had 3 partners that have like really updated their strategic plan in the last couple of years in a way that's like substantive, like not like just thought exercise, but real. So if you have a new strategic plan, for sure, if you can get that insight from the president, even better. But yes, the more you can align that with their initiatives and just help them understand why the things you've needed to do anyway are only going to help, I think that's even better. And one of the ways to do that, I would say, is a second piece of advice is don't just be a marketer, be a change agent. Like suggest ideas. I remember I met with a leader once and I went in and I said, I have a vision for how we can close a bunch of divisions, sell a bunch of real estate and reinvest this money and other things. I had this whole presentation. It was not remotely a marketing presentation. And they're like, this is great. Let me get the board chair on the phone so we can talk about it. And we didn't end up funding it, which is fine. It was a little bit of a like pretty out there idea. But like the reality is like presidents are trying to drive change. The chair of the board was pushing for like, hey, I want big ideas. And suddenly like I was playing outside the lane of marketing. So it's like marketers have a hard time getting a seat at the table, but you can also bypass that seat at the table and take a separate seat at the head. That doesn't always happen, but it's totally possible. And all that I think goes back to your point of like, do you know where the institution is going? Do you know the broader initiatives? And then do you have ideas or suggestions on how to get there faster? And I do think as marketers, like we have our hands on a lot of the knobs and we can turn a lot of things and like we can drive progress. And so, the more we can have an impact, the better. The more we can bring big ideas, the better. And that was my third piece of advice, actually, I just hit on there, was actually get to the board. The president is fantastic, but if you can get to the board, that matters. It's exciting for me, more and more folks in this industry, I hear from other CMOs about how they're presenting at quarterly board meetings and they're giving updates. I could be wrong. It might be my age, but earlier in my career, it really felt like presidents were managing boards almost in isolation and like marketers weren't anywhere near there. And so I will say that like the more you're having president and board conversations together, I think that just opens up a lot where now you really have a chance to shape some things. Maybe not everything, but at least have a bigger impact than you would have otherwise.
Fantastic. Well, I think that we've hopefully dropped a lot of advice around an experience that unfortunately more and more of our listeners are going to be finding themselves in as our campus leadership turns over at a faster and faster rate. I would love to do a whole pulse check series on this topic. And so call to action, if you're listening to this episode and you're like, maybe you've been through this a couple times, or you just feel like you have a lot to say, hit me up, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn or email me, mallory.wilsey@enrollify.org. I would really love to plan out, 3 to 5 part series on this topic. And so this is your call for either coming on to host it or be a guest. We'd love to hear from you.
I love it. And I have a call for listeners too. If you are a marketer in an institution, in particular, if you're either a CMO or on a path to CMO, I have a question for you, which is, do you want to be a college president? Because I think we are going to see a rise in operator presidents because those are the folks that can drive impact. We're going to see more presidents, I believe, in the next 10 years that come from marketing or come from enrollment and have true in-the-weeds operator mentalities. And so, did you know that you could be a college president? There are college presidents that come up from marketing that don't have a doctorate. It happens. My grandfather was a college president from marketing with an MBA. And that happened at this point was late 70s was his first presidency. And that is a path. And I've thought about that path. I've actually gone out and interviewed for college president roles before. I didn't get hired, which maybe was probably the right call on their part. But I explored it at one point in my career. And I hope you all do too, because I think we need more marketers and more enrollment professionals in that office to stick around longer to have a bigger impact.
I had no idea that you had considered this, Seth.
Yeah, I went down this path a little bit. I interviewed for probably 18 months. I took president interviews and stuff. I think I was like the fun wild card candidate. They were just like, let's bring this guy in. I was very contrarian. I was kind of like George Costanza from Seinfeld in the episode where he does the opposite of everything. Like I was like very honest with everyone. So I think they enjoyed the conversations, but I'm not surprised I didn't make it past about the second round.
Look, the day that you announce your presidency is the day that I go back to work for a campus. I'm coming. I'm going to be on your executive team, Seth.
Team effort if we do it. But until then, I hope, look, there's some people, I don't know, I'm not going to name names, but there's some people I know that listen to this podcast. I think you'd be a great president, like genuinely. And so I hope we see it. I hope that is a trend that comes.
If we are in an environment where the primary goals of the president is to fundraise, to address enrollment challenges, and to assist current students with things like student mental health, and then on the other side, be responsible for showing up at congressional hearings and stringing a few sentences together that doesn't include anti-Semitic remarks. I don't know what better job exists for somebody with a marketing communications background.
It can be done. I think people can have a huge impact. And so, maybe there's a light at the end of this tunnel after all. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
We will. We'll wait and see. And until next week, y'all, we appreciate you listening. Do not forget to go visit that beautiful new Enrollify.org website. You can subscribe to our emails, and you got to know the back half of this year. We've got a whole bunch of really great stuff planned. I am just brimming with excitement to announce it all, but I cannot spoil it. So our email subscribers will be the first to hear. Visit the site, drop us your email. And Seth, I'll see you next week. Goodbye, everybody.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.